burned their works and libraries. As an example, I can recall the Library of Sert, which contained thousands of manuscripts, most of which were burned in the atrium of the episcopal building, along with the severed head of the martyred bishop, as you know, Mar ad-Daisher, which was hanged at the entrance of the building. Focusing on Mar Kardagh, he seems to come from the late Sassanid period, from 224 until 642. This is the period which we call Sassanid period. The textual documentation is most likely from the time of Khusro II and places our martyr saint in the reign of Shapur II. The documentary source, which is written in Erbil, a city after the archaeological excavations in Nimrud, acquired the qualification as the holy city of Assyria, where the kings Sanherib and Ashurbanipal received the guarantees of their victories through the divinity Ishtar, places our martyr acting in this region. Interest for the Assyrian people of these areas come rather late, and the discovery of the legacy of the Assyrian people in the area grew as archaeology progressed with archaeological discoveries. Also, the collection of textual documentation undertaken by the well-known Assamani family contributed to the growth of European interest in the literary production handed down by the Holy Fathers of the Church of the East. The Christian community of Assyrian origin in northern Mesopotamia, I would say Assyria, has left a literary legacy which, together with what scholars found in Syria and Egypt, is of great importance and has given us access to texts of various kinds: theology, exegesis, poetry, historical prose, liturgy, philosophy, the history of martyrs of the Eastern Church, and many more. The period of expansion of the Church of the East can be considered the golden age, both in its numerical growth and in its literary production, thanks to its great intellectuals who were trained in the famous training centers, as I mentioned, Orhai, Nisibis, Amida, Seleucus, Ctesiphon, and the countless monasteries that became places of training and learning of the sciences of that time. Of that glorious Church of the East, a very small number remains today because of the persecutions and genocides that the Assyrian people have suffered throughout their existence. The most destructive genocide was the one which is coined Seipo Perma in 1915, which decimated forever the Assyrian Christian population, divided into different ecclesiastical branches. With the arrival of a considerable amount of manuscripts in the West, scholars began to work in a more orderly fashion on the literary output of the churches belonging to the Assyrian people. In fact, the first edition of the history of Mar Kardagh was published in 1890 by Jean-Baptiste Abolus, whose title was Acta Mar Kardaghi Assyria Prefecti qui sub sapore martyr occupit. In fact, from the beginning of the 20th century, Syriac studies underwent a considerable expansion, and in 1980s or 90s, they established themselves as centers of study in a large number of universities with a tradition of Semitic studies, where the contributions of great Christian authors of Assyrian origin were recovered. The textual documentation of the great intellectuals and spirituals finally reached the West. As example, we could mention some of these outstanding authors. I'm going to mention some, probably here our beloved Professor Sebastian Brock could give much more details about it, but I'm just going to mention some of them. And I'm going to use the chronological way, starting from the 2nd century onward. Mara bar Serapion, bar Desan, Afrat, Efrem of Nisibis, Isaac of Antioch, Marnarsei, Stephen bar Sedale, Jacob of Sarok, Philoxenov of Mabug, Paul of Edessa, Sergius of Reshaina, John of Ephesus, Peter III of Raqqa, Babbe the Great, Athanasius first Gamolo, Marut of Tahrid, Sahdona, John bar Penchae, Isaac of Nineveh, Jacob of Edessa, Theodore Barconi, John of Daliata, Theodore Abu Qura, Anthony of Tahrid, Theodosius Romanus, Thomas of Marga, I will come back to him afterwards, Jacob Bar Salibi, Bar Auraya or Bar Hebreus, Giwargis Werda, and Abdisho Bar Brecha. Just as an example, we have such huge figures that must be somehow taken into the community themselves in order to know what a richness we have. Among so much wealth, there is also martyrology, for it must not be forgotten that the Church of the East has the most martyrs of all the sister churches. One of the bloodiest massacres of genocides that persecuted the member of the Church of the East was under the reign of Shapur II. In reality, this Assyrian Christian community has never ceased to be persecuted and massacred to this day. As far as our martyr is concerned, interest in life that ended in martyrdom arose at the end of the 19th century, as I mentioned before. In 1890, two scholars published the story of Markardach. As I said, the Belgian Jean-Baptiste Abulos published the history of our martyr using the manuscript of Diyarbakir, which was given to him by the Archbishop of Amida, Monsignor Khayyat. In 1890, these two scholars, working independently one of another, each published an edition and translation of the history of Markardach. The Jean-Baptiste Abulos based his edition on a copy made in Mosul in 1869 of an East Syriac manuscript sent to him by the Chaldean Archbishop of Diyarbakir, as I said. Sadly, this medieval manuscript, which had been stored in the church of St. Pition in Diyarbakir, was later displaced during the turmoil following the First World War, during which the third of Assyrian population settled in northern Mesopotamia was slaughtered. Transferred to Iraq, its condition today is unknown, for me at least. Its disappearance heightens the importance of the copy published by Abulos and now held in Berlin. That same year, a second edition of the history of Markardach was published in Berlin by Hermann Feige under the title Die Geschichte des Mar Abdisho und seines Jüngers Markardach. Markardach was disciple of Mar Abdisho. The Feige, a student of Georg Hoffmann, whose book on the Persian martyrs in 1880 had done much to stimulate interest in the field. Feige's principal manuscript was a mid-18th century East Syriac manuscript from the town of Rustaqa, here in northern Iraq, with variants drawn from the two other late manuscripts produced in the town of Al-Qush and the nearby monastery of Rabban Hormuzd. The distinguished Orientalist Theodor Nöldeke published a meticulous review of these two editions in Zeitschrift der Deutschen Morgenländischen Gesellschaft in 1891 as well. Most of the translations were based upon Abulos' edition of the history of Markardach, although Paul Bejan published a third edition of the text in 1891. Abulos' edition remains preferable for, especially in academic environment, for its accessibility and clarity of organization. As Abulos explains in his preface, the variants come from another Mosul manuscript containing assorted martyr literature and a second manuscript of unspecified provenance acquired from Bejan. There is an English version of this text done in 2006 by Jewel Walker, who offers a different structure. I'm not going to use the time in order to explain it. And now I'm going to show you how, I'm using here the Bejan's version, how Kardach himself is described by his hagiographer in the text of the Church of the East. I'm going to give the English version and then read a bit the Syriac one. Therefore, my beloved, I long to tell you about the marvelous heroic deeds Nahsane and great contest of the athlete of rightness, the holy martyr of Markardach. Angels marveled and men were amazed at the great contest on his martyrdom. Now, holy Markardach was from a great, and this is the text, from a great people, Ginsa, from the stock of the kingdom of Assyrians, Atorai. His father was descendant from the renewed lineage of the house of Nimrod, and his mother from the renewed lineage of the house of Sanherib. And he was born in pagan parents lost in the error of Magianism, for his father, whose name was Gushnawi, was a prominent man in the kingdom and distinguished among the Magi. And the holy Markardach was handsome in his appearance, large in build and powerful in his body, and he possessed a spirit ready for the battles. He vigorously embraced the error of paganism and was praised for his devotion through all the territory of Persians. Here they distinguish clearly the Persians from the other people. I'm going to give a bit the short Syriac version, which is in the modern text. بدخون حبيبي رخيخنا اد اشتع الخون نسحانا وتميه وأخونا وروروي اد أطليتا تزديقوت تسهد قديشة مار قردخ هاود دواخوني روروي اد سهدوت تهار ملاخي والدمار بنيناشا هاود هاخيل قديشة مار قرداخي تاوى من جنس ربا ومن شاقة اد ملكوتا اد آتوراي أو متيبل هو من شربته مشمهته بيت نمرد وأمه من شربته مشمهته بيت صنحيرب ومن آواه حنبو وتعيوته دمخوشوته التيليد أو غير جورا هو إيدي عب ملكوته ومشمها بمخوشي قشواني شميه. I'm not going to continue reading the text in its original version. And now I'm going to read a bit also his connection to the royal house, how he came to be part or to become an important figure in the kingdom or in the empire itself. And when Qardach was about 25 years old, king of the Persians, heard about his reputation and mighty strength, Gabbaruta, and Shapur sent orders summoning him to the gate of his palace with great honor. And when Shapur gave the order and Qardach entered before him, and as soon as the king returned from the hunt, he ordered that Qardach should be given great gift and made him Pathasha, this is a title as a governor, Pathasha of Assyria, and appointed him as Marzban over the land from Tormara river, which is the Diyala river, from the Diyala river to the city of Nisibis and Sewin. And he sent him off with a retinue, sending also at the same time, only 10 minutes, my goodness. I'm going to do it, don't worry. He was well skilled in shooting, and so with arrows and so on. That's why he really somehow surprised the king, and this is why also those aspects were important in that period. From the 4th or 5th century, the cult of the saints also flourished in the Church of the East. Studies by Jean-Maurice Fier, yesterday he was mentioned, and others have amply demonstrated the richness of East Syriac literature on the topic. Drawing upon his unparalleled command of the Syriac and Arabic literary sources and direct acquaintance with the churches of northern Iraq, Fier untangled and traced the cults of numerous East Syriac Assyrian saints and martyrs. Beyond Fier's work, however, there has been remarkable little study of individual East Syriac saints. This lacuna is due to the circumstances that limits the development of this field, as it has been the case of Roman and Byzantine churches. The veneration of Mar-Kardakh offers an intriguing case study in the origins and evolution of Assyrian martyr cult. This investigation requires looking deep into the pre-Christian history of Malqi. I am going also to mention it. The ancient shrine near Arbela that hosted the annual festival of Mar-Kardakh. Mar-Kardakh's biographer introduces his hero from the beginning as coming from the stock, as I read it, of the kingdom of Assyrians, the descendant via fathers of the renewed lineage of the house of Nimrod and via his mother of the renewed lineage of the house of Sanherib. While this royal Assyrian lineage has attracted the notice of several previous commentators, this work aims introducing the evidence for its significance and demonstrating that the late Sasanian buildings at Malqi stood directly over the ruins of a major Neo-Assyrian temple, the Akitu, shrine of the goddess Ishtar of Arbela. Cuneiform documents, I'm not expert in that, but I have been reading that. Cuneiform documents of the 9th, 7th century BC clarify several aspects of the Neo-Assyrian rituals conducted at the site. The biographer of Mar-Kardakh is not the only one who writes about the life of our saint. Other textual sources, like the 2 texts from the Church of the East, the Book of Chastity by Ishar Nah of Basra of the 9th century mentions him as well, and the anonymous Chronicle of Sert, 1013, of the Common Era, preserves substantial accounts of the Kardakh legend, which show how later audience read and modified the story of the saints' heroic deeds. This later version also reported the foundation of a strong monastery at the site of the saints' martyrdom and annual festival. New appearances of the name Kardakh imply continued expansion of the saints' culting during the 8th and 9th century. Thomas of Marga's Book of Governors, mid-9th century, mentions several individuals named Kardakh active in the highland of Adiabene. According to the FIA, the history of the saints' cult after the 10th century remains vague. Although veneration of Mar-Kardakh has continued into modern times, I'm going to finish. Yes, yeah. Okay. 4 minutes? Oh, excellent. I'm more than done. The location of the saints' original cult sites has been lost, perhaps in an irreversible way. Its disappearance from the literary records coincides with the invasion of Arbela region by the Mongols in 1258. This was the main reason why we have lost a large amount of texts. Modern tradition, the comparative, this is an important. Modern historians often question the data provided in Assyrian textual sources of Eastern tradition. The comparative study of the sources is very important, but it must also be understood from a Semitic perspective. This would help to better understand the historical reality of the Assyrian people who have suffered so much throughout their existence, starting with the fall of Nineveh in 612 BC until now. The continuous insistence on the discontinuity of the Assyrian people after the collapse of the empire in the 7th century is very striking, honestly. In this lecture, I mentioned 2 Assyrians, Tatsian and Kardakh, in whose textual documentation it's clear that they belong to the Assyrian people, but due to the variety of confessional names, most modern authors do not give credence to the continuity of Assyrian peoples as such. As everyone here knows, the variety of ecclesiastical names attributed to the Assyrian people hinders the natural development of a thorough investigation that can actually prove not only the origins of some historical and religious figures of Assyrian people, but the very existence of the Assyrian people as a separate people and ethnic group. It is true that the history of the Assyrian people of the last 2,000 years is mostly religious tendency. But this does not mean that the Assyrian people, the indigenous people of this region, by the way, cannot demonstrate their continuity up to the present day. I have chosen the figure of Marqardaq intentionally so that the modern reader can have a clearer view of the Assyrian people who are denied existence as a people, since they are better known under expressions such as Nestorians, Jacobites, Chaldeans, Syrians, Syriacs, because of their religious links. Marqardaq is a clear example of continuity of the Assyrian people under the Persian power, in this case, whose imperial system also included the Assyrian people settled in Adiabene, Ashur, and Osra'ini. We know Barsama was also a governor in his time. As for the place of residence of our saint Malqi, this is why I'm going to mention it, according to the royal correspondence of, and campaign narratives of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the goddess Ishtar of Arbela was worshipped at a site near Arbela named Malqiya. It's in the text of this annals. The earliest reference to this shrine, fragmentary and well reconstructed, dates from the mid-9th century, when Shalmaneser III, returning victorious, I'm going to finish, from this campaign in the land of Urartu, which is the southern Armenia, made sacrifices of thanksgiving at Malqiya to Ishtar, the lady of Arbela. This shrine, as later sources confirm, was the ŭકેessä$ temple. That is the festival shrine of the goddess' primary temple, the ŭકેessä$ in Arbela. During a biennial festival in Ishtar's honor, worshippers accompanied the goddess cult statue as it was moved from the ŭકેessa$ to her ŭકેessä$ temple at Malqiya. Outside, of course, it was outside of the city walls of Arbela. Yeah. There were, festivals that endured at least 7 days and so on. I could continue telling you many other parts of these sources that show the continuity of our people here in their homeland. But I know the time is running. I'm thankful to you for your attention, and if there is any question and the moderator allows me to reply, I would be more than pleased. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, now keynote. If there is not keynote, I'm going to jump now to the next session, or shall we make?
Thank you very much, Dr. Efrem Yildiz. Correct me if I'm not wrong, but there's no question and answer period, correct? No, okay, Nicholas says no. So I apologize.
Thank you, Nicholas.
But I know there's questions. But unfortunately, we have to go to the next 2 sessions. But I'm sure he will take questions during the coffee break. So I will ask you to do that. But beforehand, I just want to thank the Catholic University of Erbil for hosting us, and particularly His Highness Mar Bashar Warda, who is welcoming us here today. So thank you for them. And also the organizers have prepared 2 parallel panels for us. The first panel, panel A, so if you look on page 16 of your program, panel A will be Syriac as a living culture and language here. And then panel B, Syriac literature, medieval to modern, will be where we were in the morning. So downstairs, correct? Downstairs. So either stay here or go downstairs. Thank you.
لا كده لا أنا رابط قصر
رابط قارة فالو. اوكي ام بس مالوخن قد بصورة باي برميل